But the best way to figure out how your baby is doing is their heart rate. That pain, it changes the state of mind you're in. It is your wife who makes the decisions during childbirth. The Childbirth Attorney Podcast, hosted by Gina Mundy.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Childbirth Attorney Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Mundy. Today, my guest is literally the bomb diggity. In case you are of a different generation, don't understand what that means she is an awesome human with great information. But in addition to being amazing, she is also a podcaster. She's a mom. She's a doula. She's a childbirth educator. She's a soon-to-be author, a book that she is going to publish soon that has great information about pregnancy and childbirth. And then my favorite, she's a super cool actress. Her movie, actually, she starred in a movie this past summer that was out in theaters and will be coming out on video soon. But as an attorney specializing in childbirth cases, this is one of those episodes that I find extremely important, as there is information in this episode that will help you have a healthy baby by avoiding the complications and mistakes I see. We talk a lot about natural birth and what your body is made to do during childbirth. But not only that, your baby is smart. Your baby also knows what to do during childbirth. So we go over that a lot. As I'm sure you've heard me say, one of the most common issues in my cases is the drug Pitocin, which is an intervention. And that intervention then typically leads to other interventions. I always like to say like a cascade of interventions. And that's when your mistakes and complications can occur. So taking the all-natural route where you are listening to your body is definitely the route that I would recommend as an attorney. There are very, very few cases involving natural, spontaneous vaginal birth. Skip the drugs. So join me in this episode with Emmy Robbin as we talk about everything you need to know to help you have a healthy baby.
Thank you so much for having me and seeing you again. You were on my podcast, so I'm happy to be on yours now.
Oh my goodness. I was able to listen to a little bit of our podcast together that we did a few months ago. Oh goodness. Us together. I'm like, oh, it's my feisty friend. Here she comes.
Yes, I'm very much so a big advocate for undisturbed physiological birth. And so like you mentioned, that's a very big passion of mine as a doula. I've been a doula for 5 years now, and just helping women really trust their bodies and trust their baby. We forget about baby a lot of the times. We learn so much about what we can do as the laboring mother or what our partner can do to help us, but we always forget about the baby, and the baby is really wise, and God really gave us intuition, gave us that wisdom, and gave our babies who are yet to be born that wisdom. And it's just really cool to watch when a labor is completely undisturbed, meaning there's no induction, there's no promotion of labor. Mom is really just in her element, getting bathed in oxytocin and endorphins, and then baby comes out, and we don't mess with the third stage, the placenta delivery. Like everything just goes perfect. And a lot of the times I say the only place that undisturbed physiological birth can happen is at home. You can have a natural vaginal birth at the hospital, but you cannot have an undisturbed physiological birth at the hospital. And happy to explain how that is.
I love that.
Yeah. So, a lot of women will choose an obstetrician and choose to birth in the hospital, but they want to do it naturally, right? But what does that mean? What is your goal? Is your goal to avoid medication and have a vaginal birth? Because that's not enough. That's not enough. It's not enough for a fully regulated and healthy mom and baby after the birth, because there's so much intervention that happens even just to get into that labor and delivery room. I talk about it all the time. It's basically my TED talk of, there's 10 interventions that happen that you don't even think about just to get into a labor and delivery room. Anything from timing your contractions, which I tell people, don't time your contractions. The birth that I just had last week, the mom was literally 10 minutes apart and pushed her baby out. Like her contractions were 10 minutes apart for like 6 hours. They never got closer together, and she pushed the baby out. And the midwife and I almost didn't make it there in time because she was like, I was waiting to get to 2 to 3 minutes apart to call you guys. And she was 10 minutes apart. And I see that so many times in undisturbed physiological birth. And at the hospital, their main thing is the timing of the contractions. You're not 2 minutes apart. You're not 3 minutes apart. So what do? They introduce Pitocin, right? So timing the contractions is a big misconception in natural birth. You should never be timing your contractions. You should be going inward and listening to your body and feeling the responses from your baby and letting your body get bathed in oxytocin. So mistake number 1, you're timing your contractions to see when to get to the hospital, right? Number 2, do you have animals, older children, or plants or things that you're trying to get taken care of? Or, we got to call the neighbor. We got to tell them to come, walk Mitzi or whatever, right? So you're doing logistics while you're in labor. You shouldn't be in that mind frame thinking about, oh, got to get the hospital bag. Oh, what are we forgetting, right? So those are just 2 things before you even leave your home. Third intervention, you get in your car. Laboring in a car is not fun. If you're trying to do it safely, you're going to be buckled up, right? And you're going to be sitting. Some women will be smart and labor on their hands and knees in the back, but then dad's probably driving like a bat out of hell, and that's not necessarily the safest thing to do. But laboring in the car, everybody's afraid of a car baby. As a doula, I'm like, I wish you have a car baby. I hope you have that baby before you get to the hospital because, and then number 4, our ventral vagal system, which is essentially, it's the vagus nerve, and our ventral vagal system is responsible for sensing our outside environment and going inward and telling our body we are safe in this moment, or to go in fight or flight and leave, right? So it's everything we see, smell, we hear. So if you watch an animal in the wild when they're in labor, their ears will perk up and they'll, be looking, their pupils will dilate so that they can see further, and their sense of smell gets stronger. Everything is heightened when a mammal is in labor. And the same thing happens with us as human beings. So if you look at a mom in labor, her pupils will be dilated, right? Your sense of hearing becomes so much that like noises will annoy women in labor. Like they'll hear a noise and they'll be like, can you stop eating chips? Because you can hear everything, the sense of smell. So, I try not to have any oils or perfumes on when I get to a mom in labor, because a sense of smell can either nauseate someone or, take them out of that natural state of labor. So once you arrive at the hospital, you're coming into fluorescent, bright lights, right? So the lights are bright, right? In labor, we want to keep the lights as low as possible. You want to keep them low because your pupils are dilated, and low lights helps you progress. So you get to the hospital, bright lights, and then so your body's trying to assess, like, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Right? That ventral vagal system. And then you're meeting strangers. You're checking in. You've never met this person at the front desk at triage, right? So you're seeing strangers. So now you have 2 more interventions. Your ventral vagal is completely disrupted. It's all sanitized. You smell Clorox, or you're smelling whatever they're cleaning the hospital with, and the sounds, stroke level 4, stroke level. I mean, you hear that at the hospital all the time. It's so annoying as a doula. Whenever I used to do hospital, it'd be like stroke alert, level 5. And you're like in the middle of labor and it's just going off everywhere. So there's just so much disruption, and you haven't even gotten checked in. So then you get checked in. So now we're on, 5th intervention, right? So you're getting checked in and you're meeting your, triage nurse or whoever's going to check you into triage. And they're going to start asking you questions. How are you feeling? Has your water broken? How far apart are your contractions? So now you're having to get out of this brain, this going inward brain that you're supposed to be in, and you have to get into your thinking brain. You have to answer questions. You should never be asked questions in your birth. You should just be left alone and not talked to. But when you get to the hospital, your husband cannot sign the papers for you. Your husband can't answer the admission questions for you. They are talking to the laboring mother. So you're having contractions and you're having to sign your rights to a C-section if they need to do a C-section, and then, so that's That's 6. So then 7, they're putting an IV port in you and you can decline all of this stuff, but they're putting an IV port in you. Why are they putting an IV port in you? In case they have to give you medication, the port is already there. They have access to it very quickly, if they need to administer something. So that doesn't feel good, getting an IV port put in. It takes you out of it for sure. And then you're also like, now you're at their discretion. You can get hooked up to fluids. You can get hooked up to whatever they want to do because you have given them access to your vein, literally. So then they're going to hook you up to monitors. They're going to put things around your waist, these belts, these annoying belts that do not feel good. And they're so annoying. And I say that these continuous fetal monitors are literally the number one cause of cortisol release in women in the hospital, because while they're there to check on the baby, they move around all the time. The baby doesn't like it. The baby doesn't like it for a reason. It's like 85 dBs of sound, like a rock concert going off. So the baby's like trying to run away from it. So they're constantly having to move these belts around. And you're just like, can you just leave me alone? Like they keep coming back in. Hey, mom, sorry. We gotta move the belts around. It's not, so it just gets really annoying. But then they have another belt on there that's supposed to measure your contractions and time your contractions for you. And this doesn't do that because you could cough, you could sit up. It is not accurate whatsoever. And when they're timing your contractions, you're basically you're performing for them, right? So now you've gotten to this hospital and you're having to like perform for them. Like, I want to prove to you that I'm 4 minutes apart and I'm ready to go into the labor and delivery room, because they have to determine in triage if you are in labor and if they can get you a labor and delivery room. So you're giving that power over to the hospital. And so, that's intervention number 8. And then the doctor comes in, and it might not even be the OB that you're with. It could be somebody at your practice. So, if it's not your OB, you're all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I don't have my OB. I don't know this doctor. Right. And they want to do a cervical exam. So they want to stick their hand where it shouldn't be stuck in a birth. You shouldn't have cervical checks. And that's a whole other episode that I did on my podcast, how they're not necessary because a cervical exam doesn't tell you anything. A mom could literally be at a 1 and have a baby 45 minutes later. And I've seen it. Or 2 and an hour later, I've seen that as well. Or she could be at an 8 for 10 hours, and that's fine too. So, a cervical exam isn't going to tell you where you are in labor, but if a mom is like at a 3 or something, but she's really feeling it, because that happens a lot of the times, and then baby's born an hour later, they could tell you to go home. And so then that's gaslighting. It's medical gaslighting. So giving them the permission to insert their hand, in there to do a cervical exam, it doesn't tell anything except for whether or not to go home or get checked in. If you're feeling the contractions, waves, surges, however you want to refer to them, and you feel like you're in labor, you're in labor. Nobody needs to validate or invalidate that for you. And so again, that's intervention number 9. And then intervention number 10 is all of a sudden now you have to up and go into another room, a labor and delivery room, and you get a whole new team. You get a whole new nurse. You get, you get a whole new bed. You got to get up and walk and go there. So like I said, there's 10 interventions that disrupt an undisturbed physiological birth just to check in to your L&D room. And so that, in a nutshell, that kind of explains how you cannot have an undisturbed physiological birth in a hospital. It's impossible. And with that being said, obstetricians have never, unless they were a midwife before, or unless they free birthed their own baby, they have never witnessed an undisturbed physiological birth. All they know how to do is manage birth. So you are agreeing to have your birth managed, and with hopes and dreams that you're going to have a natural vaginal birth. And it is very hard nowadays to get that in the hospital. You're going to have to labor at home until you are about to push that baby out and then just show up to the hospital and push it out. But at that point, why not just have baby at home? It's like,
right.
Yeah. Sorry. I just talked a lot, but
no, are you kidding me? I love this.
Yeah.
I could just sit and listen to you. I don't actually need to talk. You can just go ahead. So this is the audience knows too, with home birth, OBs have not really experienced what you're saying with the physiological birth, the undisturbed birth, because they don't do home births.
No, they think it's
right?
dangerous. They think it's dangerous. But in fact, home birth is, in my opinion, I think home birth is safer. And people that are scared of home birth or think that home birth is dangerous, they don't understand home birth, because when you're home birthing with a licensed midwife, you're having somebody who is Dopplering, who is checking on baby. And I always say, home birth is safe because we're taking lead from the baby. We're not rushing the baby. If the baby is tolerating labor, right? That's what we call it. Like when their heart rate sounds fine and they're doing really good, you just leave it alone. You don't do anything, So the midwife will come in and she'll listen. She'll listen during a contraction. She'll listen not during a contraction. She just wants to get a baseline for baby's heart rate and then make sure that baby's getting that acceleration during during a contraction, which is what they listen for at the hospital. It's just constantly, but there's ebbs and flows with the heart rate. Sometimes the baby's sleeping and sometimes the baby's really active. And so if a hospital's listening all the time, and whenever you're pushing a baby out, when the baby's getting that squeeze, their heart rate drops. It goes lower on purpose. And the hospital will use that a lot of the times to get a vacuum, to get forceps, or to C-section a mom. And a midwife understands, like, it's going to go down. It's going to go down. Like sometimes it goes down to like 80, 85. And they just keep listening. And then it'll go right back up to 135 or 140 or whatever. But like, they just want to make sure that recovery happens. If that recovery doesn't happen, then they'll transfer. They'll transfer if they hear, baby's not sounding good. And you call the hospital ahead of time. How long does it take to get an anesthesiologist into a room when it's you don't just, when there's an emergency in birth, you don't just go from the room to the OR right away. It takes about an hour, right? Even when the baby's heart rate's starting to sound a little, like the nurses will come and get you on your side or try this side while they're getting the OR prepped. So the midwife calls ahead, hey, get an OR or something ready. This is not right. And we can ambulance to the hospital, usually getting there in less than 20, 30 minutes, and then everything's ready to go. And I haven't witnessed, I haven't witnessed what you represent in the 5 years that I've been doing, because I work with midwives. Now, when I was working in the hospital, I would go home feeling sick every night because I would just see the OBs like, let's just break your water. Let's just rush it along. And then all of a sudden the baby's heart rate would freak out. And it's just like, I'm just praying. I don't have to do that in home birth. In home birth, it's like, can I bring you some hot tea? Can I rub your back? Like, let me just let you and your husband like kiss, and we'll step out of the room and we'll come back in a little bit. And the midwife and I'll just sit on the couch and hang out. It's such a cool, beautiful energy and space in home birth. It's completely different. And when the baby comes out, like, that's a whole other jam at the hospital, like it's in home birth, the midwife understands the mother baby dyad. You're still one unit, for 9 months postpartum, like you keep that baby on you, close to you, with you constantly. And in the hospital, they're just like waiting to take them to the warmer, waiting to do their APGAR. And it's at home. That's just so, and that messes with breastfeeding. It messes with postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression. There's so much that happens that's disrupted in a hospital. So yeah, I'm a home birth fan.
No, I know. I love it. And, anyone who ever listens to me knows, in my childbirth cases, the number one most common fact is Pitocin in the cases. And what happens is it's like, well, that's after the first 10 interventions that you just talked about. So there's all these, interventions, prohibiting a mom from having an undisturbed birth. But then you get there, especially if you start the Pitocin, and you're right, they like their guidelines. There's active labor, right? And if you're not having 2 to 3 contractions for a couple hours and you're not, and you're 6 centimeters dilated, whatnot, they'll literally be like, oh, you have an arrest of labor, C-section Pitocin, intervention.
Your body doesn't work. They'll convince
Right.
women that their bodies
Right, where
aren't
you're
meant to have
like, no,
birth.
no, no, there's no, and I love this because it's so true. Every labor is different. Every person's different. So what might be active labor for you may be completely different for somebody else. So just throwing these guidelines and then managing them accordingly, and then again, Pitocin and all that, which once we start Pitocin, that's a cascade of interventions. That's
Totally.
11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I mean, and it's just, it goes that way. And the problem is when you start Pitocin and you start these interventions, that's when the complications and mistakes occur.
Yeah.
So
well, the
that's
baby
why
wants
when
to
I
take a
listen to you,
rest.
I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, the baby wants to take a rest. People don't understand that babies are like getting squeezed constantly in labor, and they want to sleep. Sometimes they need to sleep right before coming out. Sometimes transition is what they call it. Like, I hate the phases of labor. I don't even talk about them anymore because I've literally seen a woman go from early to pushing a baby out in an hour, like literally I had a 57-minute birth and I'm like, okay, well, what phase was she in when she called me? It's like, I don't even talk about early active transition anymore because what are we talking about? We're talking about where the cervix is, and that's going to determine where you're at in labor. Nope, false. You could be at a 4 and you could be in transition. You could be at a 2 and you could be in transition. And the medical model, the medical school doesn't teach that, but I see that. I've seen women be at a 2 and be just like roaring in the bathtub, and we're all just waiting and waiting and waiting for the baby to come out, and she's doing that, and then the midwife checks her and is like, all of a sudden there's doubt now in the birth because the midwife is like, she's only at a 2, and it's like, oh. And then the mom hears that, and then the mom's like disappointed, and then labor hormones stop, and then she transfers and she goes to the hospital, and she gets to the hospital and pushes the baby out 45 minutes later because, because she's like, a 2, I can't do this for another 10 hours, and then she gets to the hospital and pushes the baby out 45 minutes later. And it's like, oh my gosh, if we would have just not checked, your body was doing it. You know what I mean? Like her body was doing it. So I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. I've done, almost 100 births at this point, and I've never seen a mom's birth like ducka. You know what I mean? It's just they put women into boxes like so much. We're just boxed in for them. And if we don't fit that box, then guess what? They get to add medication. They get to C-section us. And then once you get a C-section, you don't think the doctors aren't thinking about, does this woman want to have more children? I had a C-section at 38. So that was my first baby. I had children later in life. And then I had my home birth after a cesarean at 41 because I was like, there's no way in hell I'm doing this in a hospital. But every single person that knew I was doing a home birth at 41 that was very medical minded was like, oh my gosh, that is, first of all, you're old. That is very dangerous. Second of all, you can't have a vaginal birth after a C-section. And I'm like, you're wrong. A VBAC is actually low risk. You're not high risk just because you're a VBAC. There's things to look for, like where is the placenta compared to your C-section scar? That's very important. You don't want placenta accretia, right? But other than that, a VBAC is very, very low risk, and absolutely you can have a VBAC at home. And actually, you are 80% more likely to get your VBAC if you choose a home birth over a hospital, because you're going to be able to be allowed to go into spontaneous labor. You're probably going to be more empowered. You're more entrusting with your body. And so I love helping women break down their cesarean birth. That was an emergency cesarean. And unless it was a true emergency, which are very rare, 1%, I can usually help a mother become back in tuned with her body and trusting and empowered, and they will have a VBAC. They will have it, and they'll have it at home.
That is great.
Yeah.
And your C-section was avoidable, right?
Completely. 1000%.
Why?
I was gaslit. I was with midwives too. So a lot of people think like just because they're hiring a midwife that, oh, I don't have to, I just listen to my, and it's like, no. You have to be empowered. You have to spot the gaslighting because everybody's human and everybody has their own fears. And I've seen midwives that are like, you can just do some primrose oil and some castor oil and, down the rabbit hole it goes. It's a different kind of cascade of intervention, and that's what happened to me is I thought I was like going to get this natural birth because I was choosing midwives, but instead I chose the wrong midwives. I chose midwives that were scared that I was over 35. They were scared of the size of my baby. They had fears that they didn't tell me about. But looking back, I'm like, oh, I know exactly why they did all the things they did. They broke my water. They did. I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot of things that they did that landed me in a transfer situation. Once I got to the hospital, I was so exhausted that I just was like, give me all the things. I don't care. And then once the Pitocin hit, it was down the rabbit hole. And then I ended up, yeah, I almost died. Not my baby. My baby came out totally fine, but I was in bad shape, and it was all because of the Pitocin. My body did not respond well. I ended up with postpartum preeclampsia. It was very bad. That's a big thing with Pitocin.
That's huge. The delivery is supposed to resolve the preeclampsia. So if you develop it after,
postpartum preeclampsia, I have only seen with Pitocin administration. So I'm not a doctor, but we could venture to say in a case study, if they ever did one, which they wouldn't, that administration of Pitocin raises your risk of postpartum preeclampsia. So if you're somebody who's had postpartum preeclampsia and you were given Pitocin, then avoid it.
Let me know.
Yeah. And let Gina know. Let's do it.
Right? So I like it too, because you also work. So if somebody, let's say, has a pretty rough first, delivery of their baby, whether it's an avoidable C-section, they have birth trauma, then you will come in and help mom, help dad, help the families, almost have like a redemption birth, right? Where, we can get through this together. And then then obviously with the redemption birth, let's do it at the house and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you do that for families. Yeah. That's awesome that they, you have your resource out there. When you're doing that, are you, can you do that remotely? Or do they have to be living by you?
I can definitely empower them remotely. So that's something that I do. I have a bunch of webinars coming up. I have a bunch of Zooms that I'm going to do that, a bunch of people can log on to. And I'm going to do 3 hours at a time. Basically what I do in my one-on-one. So I offer one-on-one services, but I want to start doing these 3-hour master classes for first-time parents to break down their fears. Because if you're choosing a hospital to birth your baby, unless you're really high risk, let's say you have epilepsy or something and you really need to be monitored at a hospital in case you have a seizure or something, there's no reason to birth at a hospital if you're a low risk pregnancy. So if you're choosing a hospital, then there's fear there. There is fear there. And a lot of the times it might not even be the mom, it might be the partner. So the mom is feeling pressure to birth in a hospital because the partner or the partner's mom or that mother-in-law comes in and is like, you're not having my grandchild at home. That's unsafe. And then they don't know how to navigate that. So I have 3-hour master classes that I'm going to just start doing once a month. It's going to start in October 20th, Sunday, October 20th from 4 to 7 p.m. Central Time is going to be my first one. I'm actually putting
real quick, since we're talking, where do they find that?
On my website. Yeah, on my website, emmyrobindoula.com. I'll probably have a pop-up or something when they first go there, but I'm going to create that actual event as soon as we're done with this.
But yeah, in the show notes for everybody too.
I love that. Yeah. And then I'll be doing it once a month. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And then when my book comes out, my goal is to start, doing workshops, traveling around the country and just doing weekend workshops with partners and just having both of them show up, breaking down the fear in both of them, teaching the husband how to be a fierce advocate for his wife and the things that he can really do to help support that undisturbed natural physiological birth. But yeah, breaking down the fear is really the first thing. It's like, you can continue to choose to birth in a hospital, but if you're going to do that, you cannot have fear, because they will pull the dead baby card on you all day long in order to get you to submit to what they want. Right. So it's like, okay, fine. If you don't want to get induced, then, your chances of a dead baby. It's like they say those words too. They fear monger you as you get towards the end of your pregnancy. And it's just, I have an episode on it called Bait and Switch. And it really just talks about how obstetricians, when I just did hospital births, it was almost like when they would hit their 35-week appointment, I'd be like, okay, this is what's going to happen. They're going to say this, this, and this, and this. Your baby has to be in this position. They have to do this. Okay, when you hit your 37-week appointment, this is what's going to happen. When you hit your 38-week appointment, they're going to start talking induction. It's like every appointment, my client would come back and be like, you were spot on. And I'm like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to stay empowered, and are you going to use your voice? So I want to get people empowered before they get to that point, like preferably before conception would be nice. Like, I would like people to be fully empowered on undisturbed physiological birth, like just super educated. Because again, I can't stress it enough. God did not mess up when he created us. It's so cool. The hormone cocktails, the cardinal movements, the way we're shaped, the way we're designed. And we cannot let this 35% C-section rate continue to rise, or 100 years down the road, we will not be able to give birth vaginally. If we continue to do C-section after C-section after C-section, you have to think of the implications of what it's going to do in the human race. And we're going to need surgeons. So we, as women, we have to, for our daughters and for our daughters' daughters, we have to desire this. We have to desire to birth this way. And everybody is just afraid of the pain. And I can tell you right now, the pain is not the reason that people ask for epidurals in home birth. It's not the reason at all. I've never had a mom look at me and be like, I want the epidural. This is too much pain. Ever. I've never had a mom do that. When you're empowered and you understand what's happening with your body, and you're able to like connect your brain and your body to what's happening, women enjoy it. Like, I don't know, you welcome the next surge. You welcome what's going to happen, because it's bringing you closer to your baby, and you're getting bathed in endorphins as well as oxytocin. So it's almost like you're high. You're high on the orgasm hormone. Literally, that's why they call it orgasmic birth. It's because that same hormone the same hormone that our body releases when we orgasm, which is oxytocin, in birth, you and your baby are literally being flooded with it. And in between the surges, you're getting flooded with endorphins, and so is your baby. And endorphins are like natural painkillers. So you have a surge, and then in between, your body goes zoom, and it floods you and the baby with endorphins. So that is the reason why women who have come to me are like, I'm just really scared of the pain. I don't know if I can do this. I've never broken a bone in my body. I look at them and I say, having a natural undisturbed physiological birth has nothing to do with your pain tolerance, because God gave you the ability to do this, and it's pain with a purpose. You have to be able to feel what's happening so that you can move. Because like, your right hip will hurt, and you'll instinctually pop to the left. And that's your baby saying, hey, mom, move. I need to get over, And if you can't feel that, then yes, your baby will get stuck. The epidurals cause babies to get stuck. Babies don't get stuck with home birth because there's so much movement. You're listening to your body. You have a doula that's helping you in positions, like it's a beautiful dance. It really is. And it's so cool to just, I don't know, you as somebody who's there in the room, it's coming out of the pores. I get bathed in oxytocin. I leave births and I'm just like, oh, that was so, like I come home and my husband's like, you're not going to sleep for 3 days, huh? It's like being on coffee. You just feel so good, just even witnessing it. And I just desire every woman to have that, it's this birth trauma that's happening. The infant and fetal mortality, the maternal mortality rates in the United States are just unnecessary. And it's not home birth. It's not home birth is like what, 1.6% of birth. So it's not home birth that's getting us nothing. Home birth. Yeah. It's the 98 point whatever percent of hospital birth that's giving these numbers. So it's just, I just really desire everybody to just be empowered. At least educate and empower yourself. And if you still decide after that you still want to do a hospital birth, then at least you'll know how to dance around the interventions. At least you'll know, like, if they come in and they really want to do Pitocin, to ask for a hospital pump and say, well, can I at least pump my breasts with the hospital pump for 20 minutes and see if that does anything? Can I release natural oxytocin? There's all sorts of things that you can do if you're gonna choose a hospital birth that you can avoid. I know lots of women who have done, natural vaginal, beautiful births at hospitals, but that's not without fighting, and they're not still technically getting that full amazing. It's like, if you're going to do it naturally, unmedicated at the hospital, why not enjoy it at the comfort of your own home? Like, right. You can go to sleep afterwards. You don't have people coming in every 20 minutes to take your blood pressure and wake you up your first night with your baby. It's like, you're just bonding and sleeping with baby, and your husband can just go make you soup if you're wanting soup, or make you a grilled cheese sandwich if you want a grilled cheese sandwich. You don't have to wait for the cafeteria to open at 7 a.m. It's like, there's so many benefits. I could go on and on, Gina. I could literally.
I know. I love it.
This would be a 5-hour podcast.
Like, let's say, like, there's, some moms out there and they're like, love what you're saying, but maybe they are getting the pressure from the husband, the mother-in-law, whoever, friends. Yeah. Oh, you need to stay with the hospital. You need to stay with the hospital, but they know everything about staying natural. So they do decide to go to the hospital to, deliver their baby, but they're like, okay, we're going to go all natural. I know that they're going to try to, maybe implement like, or give me Pitocin if I stall out or if my contractions aren't close enough. Like, they're kind of ready. But so you just mentioned, for instance, getting the breast pump and pumping the breast for natural oxytocin. So they don't maybe have to then, I guess, start Pitocin. The synthetic, which is like the synthetic oxytocin that your body releases. But like, what are just a couple other things that they could like the 3 or 4 or 5 most important things that they should know, just like that, about
laboring at home as long as possible. And that doesn't mean timing your contractions. That means feeling into your body. Because if you do that, you might end up having your baby at home accidentally. And if you really, as the woman, that's what you desired, then there's ways around, like your mother-in-law or your husband who has fear, because that's not them having the baby, it's you having the baby. And I will tell you, the number one thing that leads to birth trauma isn't something happening to the mom and the baby. That is traumatic. But the birth trauma that I work with is women that are being gaslit, fear-mongered, or manipulated into doing something that they didn't want to do. Meaning, if the mom really desired a home birth and her husband and mother-in-law kind of bullied her into doing a hospital birth, you're going to have birth trauma anyways, even if it goes beautiful. You're going to sit there and wonder, what if I would have just had a home birth? What if I would have just done that at home? Even if the birth goes beautiful at the hospital, you're going to be on a high for a while, but then come month 4, month 5, month 6, you're going to look back and you're going to be like, oh, I really wanted that home birth. And again, we'll do it with baby number 2. Everybody's always like, we'll do it with baby number 2. Baby number 1, we're going to do this. It's like, why take that chance? Why? Because then you're going to be doing a VBAC if you end up in a C-section. Like, just do it at home. I will empower you. I will get your mother-in-law and your husband on board. But to answer your question, a couple natural things. 1, labor at home. Labor at home as long as you possibly can. And you will know, you'll start feeling a lot of pressure in your lower back. Don't be afraid of having a car baby. Most first-time moms, it takes at least an hour or 2 minimum, to really push that baby out of the canal, right? Even with fetal ejection. I mean, I digress. I've seen first-time moms do it in 15 minutes, but you get an epidural, you're talking 4 or 5, upwards of 10 hours if the doctor lets you, right? So I would really try to labor at home as long as possible. Secondly, bring clary sage. So clary sage is an essential oil that actually helps the brain release natural oxytocin. Some women
Oh.
love the smell of it. Some women hate the smell of it. If you hate the smell of it, don't do it. If you love the smell of it, your husband can do a couple drops in his hands and rub them together and just kind of, that's what I do as a doula, right? Or I'll put some in a oil diffuser. And if I'm at a hospital, the nurses, if anybody's pregnant, like in third trimester or whatever, they will not have our room. That's how powerful it is, because it can actually like induce contractions, and like it can, women, if you're on your period, it'll make your uterus start, it makes women have cramps.
Wow.
It makes you very crampy. It's not going to like have you miscarriage or something if you're pregnant, but it's a very, it induces oxytocin in the body. So clary sage is a very powerful essential oil. So have that in your birth bag if you're going to go to the hospital. I would venture to say that some hospitals are like a little late in getting you the pump. So if you have your own breast pump, pack that in your hospital bag. That way you don't have to wait for them to bring you a hospital pump, and it's a pump that you are going to be using at home. So it's a good time to get to know your pump. So yeah, pack a hospital pump. These things will help release natural oxytocin. If you don't like your nurse, if they are not vibing with you, if you're just like, ooh, she's kind of, you can always ask for a new nurse. You can always ask for a new nurse. I'm going to say that again, because if you have a nurse, and you and I talked about this on my podcast with you, if you have a nurse that's having a bad day, just broke up with her boyfriend, her mom might have just passed away or something, you don't know who you're getting. Or she's ready to quit, and you're just like one of the last births that she's going to do, and she's ready to quit. If you can sense not anything other than loving energy from your labor and delivery nurse, then you just politely ask for the charge nurse, speak to the charge nurse and say, can I please be assigned a new nurse? My nurse is fine, just not really vibing with her. Can you get me somebody who's a little bit more loving energy? I would like that in my birth, right? Because that's very important. Who we have in our birth space is very important. And then you can request to not be disturbed. So if they want to do it, and you can also decline cervical checks. This is, they will tell you can't, but you can. Because when you submit to a cervical check, what you're doing is you're giving them ammo to tell you how far along you are in labor versus you telling them how far along you think you are in labor, right? The monitors, the wired monitors, you can request a wireless, a Bluetooth monitor, which basically just tapes to your stomach. So you're not wired, you're not plugged into machines. And so you can free move, you can move around, you can do squats, it's usually waterproof. So you can go get in the shower, all the things. So the wireless monitor is a big one.
It's called the Monica.
The Monica. Yeah. But sometimes they'll be like, oh, we don't have any, or, oh, you have to turn off all your Bluetooth devices, or, it's like they try to use excuses to not use the Monica. And then they'll sit there and say, but it's not as accurate picking up your contractions. You don't need a machine to tell you how strong your contractions are or how close together they are. It doesn't matter. If you're in labor, you're in labor, and if you're laboring at home as long as possible, my hope is that you get to the hospital in transition and you're about to push the baby out. So it doesn't really matter how far apart your contractions are, right? Like that's the best way to have a natural vaginal birth at a hospital, is getting there at the last second, like where you feel like you're about to have a big poop and you're like, okay, let's go get in the car. And then if you have a car baby, that's awesome. Like you pull up to the hospital and you go up to your postpartum room and then they'll take care of you from there. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's just some of the things that you can do to really assist yourself is clary sage, breast pump.
Perfect.
Avoid cervical checks.
Those are great. And Mom, sometimes I feel like I repeat myself a lot. You are the decision maker at the hospital when they're telling you, hey, we're going to check your cervix. What they should be saying is, hi, we'd like to check your cervix right now, and this is why. So again, you can be like, yes, no. breaking bag of water. They should be like, we recommend breaking your bag of water. This is
Mhm.
why. And then you make the decision on
Mhm.
whether you want that or not. But so this is extremely exciting,
Yay.
Emmy. You are currently working on your book. Well,
Yeah.
you logged on today and you're like, I forget you're an actress and you
Yeah.
just starred in a huge movie. You're like, I'm authoring a book. And I'm like, you go, girl.
Yeah.
I don't know which one you want to talk about first, but I gotta talk about both.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know you
Yeah.
began the book and then hit the movie. The
Yeah.
movie is Protocol 7. It was
Protocol
just in
7.
theaters. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was in theaters all over the country, and now it is on a streaming app. It's called yow.tv. It's YOW.tv. Andy Wakefield, his amazing producers Joey and Brian, they started a new streaming app, and I'm all about medical freedom, body autonomy. So this script came across my desk. I'd stepped away from acting for a while. I used to be in like the blood and guts and gore and action movies, for 20 years. And I kind of stepped away from that when I became a mother and when I started being a doula. And I decided to step back into acting with this script. With COVID and everything, they were asking us to slate our vaccine status. I thought it was very disgusting. I'm like, why do you want my medical history in order to be an actress? This is so dumb. And so I just stopped acting. And with Andy Wakefield, who, he's done Vaxxed. He's a very big teacher in the vaccine world. He was, he's a doctor. He's just incredible. He wrote this script with Terry Rossio, who does like Pirates of the Caribbean, Aladdin, Shrek. He's just a really incredible writer in Hollywood. And him and Andy got together and they wrote this script based upon a true story. Two whistleblowers from Merck Labs came forward, and it's a real case. I play one of the whistleblowers. Her name's Joan, and yeah, it's just a really great film to watch if you are a parent, if you are a soon-to-be parent. It is based upon the MMR vaccine. But yeah, it's a really incredible story and it has heart. So it's like true story. It's a docudrama. So it's like Aaron in the vein of Aaron Brockovich. Very, very similar feelings at the end. If you really liked Aaron Brockovich, you will love Protocol 7. And Andy is working on a bunch of other films as well. So I'm really excited about that like, there's a director out there that is doing films that speak to me on a personal level, because as an actress, I've made that decision. Like I will only be a part of projects moving forward that speak to me on a personal level. And something that's big to me, again, is medical freedom and body autonomy. So that's out on yow.tv currently. And then I believe they said it's going to Amazon Prime, Roku, and like all the other streaming apps. He had said the end of September. So I believe probably here pretty soon. But yeah, if you support yow.tv, it's a free streaming app right now, but you can rent the movie. I believe it's like $9 to rent. And then you can also rent any of his other movies, watch his other movies, Vaxxed, and a couple other movies that are up there actually for free to watch. And they'll be getting more and more artists submitting their stuff to their streaming app, which I think is just going to be so cool. So yow.tv. And then, my book, this is something, I mean, I like to talk. I'm very, very passionate about educating and empowering couples for childbirth. And talking to you on my podcast, I was just like, oh my gosh, this woman validates everything that I've been saying, essentially. Just the work that you're doing and just, yeah. So,
Thank you. 100%.
Yeah. So
that's why I wanted you immediately on my podcast. I'm like,
yeah.
Because I mean, you are my first episode that I'm recording on my podcast since I was on your podcast.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. Oh, no. I was like, you're coming on because, again, this podcast is to help parents have a safer childbirth, have a healthy baby, avoid what I see. And, what you say is just, I just love it.
And I hate that. Like, I don't want it to come across. Yeah. And I don't want it to come across like, and that's the same thing with my book is, like, I don't want it to come across that like, oh, you're choosing the hospital, you're bad. I'm a Christian woman. I believe that God designed us perfectly. I believe that everybody talks about, oh, it gave Eve pain in childbirth. Yes, for a reason. It changes you when you have an undisturbed physiological birth. I see women that do this all the time, especially their redemption births. They will also like birth a business or start a podcast, or it literally, when you birth undisturbed the way that God designed us, it turns you into this like lion. I don't know how to describe it, but that's what God created childbirth for, is to feel all the things. It makes you a selfless, I don't know. And so I hate being like, well, you choose a hospital birth, you have fear, you're better, that's not what I'm trying to say. I just want to empower people and teach them about physiological birth and what happens in physiological birth. And if you still choose to do it in a hospital afterwards, at least you know how to navigate what's going on with your body as it's going on. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that also protects the baby, you know what I mean, in the long run. So yeah, my book, that's essentially what I want, is just birthing how God designed us to birth in that true undisturbed physiological way. And, talking about my personal redemption story at 41, because advanced maternal age doesn't mean anything. If you have a working womb, then you can still have a baby. I have women that come to me at 45, 46, 47, and they're like, I just feel like I'm too old. I'm like, go get your levels checked. They're like, oh, looks like I'm 30, my eggs are good, this and this and this. I'm like, if you want to have a baby, have a baby. If that's what you want, I feel like society has just really told us how to have a baby, when to have a baby, where to have a baby. And that's not true. If we go back to trusting our body, trusting God, trusting everything, having faith, then we can have babies, It's not unsafe. I mean, my husband and I were just having a conversation this morning. I'm 42 now. And we were talking about, if we get our land and our chickens and this and that, I was like, I'll have another baby, and I might be 44, 45 by the time that comes. I don't care if I'm not in premenopause, I'm going to have another baby, because I loved being pregnant and I loved birthing my child. And if I could have 10 more children, I would, so
yeah, that's great.
That's my book essentially, is just talking about the redemption births that I've done, talking about birth trauma, what causes birth trauma, how to avoid that. And then just really going through kind of what I talked about at the beginning, how you can choose to have a natural birth at a hospital, but it's not going to be an undisturbed physiological birth. And then just talking about, just going through the process of childbirth, and from a doula's point of view, like how the partner can help, how you can set your space up, how you can, pick your team, the importance of picking your birth team, how to interview midwives, because you're not just because you have a midwife doesn't mean you're going to get your way. You still have a human being that you're dealing with that views birth a certain way. So really interviewing your midwife, and will you deliver breech? Will you deliver me past 42 weeks? Are you scared of the size of my baby? Are you scared that I'm 44? You know what I mean? Like, get to know these people before you contractually agree to have your baby with them, And so my book is really going to just empower people. But in the meantime, until it comes out, I'm hoping that these Zoom fun meetup workshops that I'm going to be doing once a month will help empower people leading up to it. Yeah.
Boom. Right there.
Boom.
I love it. And I know we've gone over a couple of places my audience can find you. Really, there's your website. Yeah. I don't know if anything else you want to tell my audience or repeat it.
Yeah.
They'll be in show notes again, but
yeah, Instagram. I have and Facebook. It's at Emmy Robbin Doula, 2 M's, 2 B's, doula. Both my Facebook and web business page and my Instagram.
Promise me. Well, I don't think I need you to promise me, because I know you.
Oh, I will totally.
Once you
publish your book. I want you back on. We're going to
Got it.
remind everybody that it exists. It's out there. It's ready for them to read and whatnot. So we'll
And they need
definitely
to
have
read
you
your
back
book
on soon.
too.
Oh
Like
yeah,
your
we're
book
constantly
also.
promoting that. So
Yeah.
again, the goal of both of us is to, again, help families have a healthy baby. And that's why we're out there. That's why we're collaborating together, doing podcasts like this, because, we're just trying to help. So they'll check it out, and I'm sure they've checked out mine. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, I just talk so much.
Oh, I could just sit and listen to you. I'm good. And I'm sure my audience is the same way. They'd rather hear from you than me. They probably hear me enough. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of the Childbirth Attorney Podcast. I recorded this episode a little bit over a week ago, so I've had a chance to marinate in what Emmy had to say, and I just really wish this is information I would have had, when it was time to deliver my first baby over 20 years ago. And again, I just want to reiterate one more time that most of my cases involve intervention. They involve the drug Pitocin, which then it's like a cascade of interventions, and that's when the mistakes and complications occur. There are very, very few cases that I have seen involving natural vaginal birth, skip the drugs. So it's definitely, as the childbirth attorney, if it's this, if everybody's good with it and you're good candidate and whatnot, that's definitely a route that, I would recommend when possible. So anyway, but if you're listening on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. And Instagram is definitely my social media of choice at Gina Mundy. My website has some other good information for parents, including, where to buy my book and blog and some other good resources at ginamundy.com. So thanks again for tuning in. I love my subscribers, but I've watched my numbers go up a little bit. So I just want to tell my subscribers, I appreciate you, and I hope you get a lot out of this podcast because I'm doing it to help you have a healthy baby. Until next time, hug those kiddos.